You know, in a world where everything feels like everything is tracked and recorded, some stories just refuse to be finished. They just linger. They sit in dusty case files, and they stay in our minds, asking these questions we still, for the life of us, can't answer. Today, we're going to dive into 3 of those cases, 3 mysteries that just seem to defy time itself.
I mean, just think about it for a second. The science we have today is absolutely incredible. We can literally solve a decades-old crime from a single strand of hair, you know? Using stuff like genetic genealogy and DNA analysis, that would have sounded like science fiction not that long ago. And these tools have brought answers to hundreds, maybe thousands of families who thought they'd never get them.
And that's the real puzzle, isn't it? With all of this amazing technology at our fingertips, how is it possible that some stories just stop? That for some families, the final chapter is just blank.
Yeah. Despite all our progress, there are still thousands of cold cases out there. And today, we're going to look at the source material behind 3 of the most haunting ones. We've got the story of a little girl whose horrible fate ended up saving others, a woman who might have just erased herself from existence, and a military cadet who literally walked away into a world of secrets. So our first case, it starts with an absolutely heartbreaking story. It's about a 9-year-old girl, and what happened to her sparked a change so powerful it has saved thousands of lives since. But for Amber herself, well, justice has been a long time coming. What's so terrifying here is just how fast everything happened. On January 13th, 1996, Amber's just a kid out riding her bike. An eyewitness sees her, kicking and screaming, being forced into a truck. A huge search kicks off right away, but it was just too late. 4 days later, her body is found in a creek nearby. Just 4 days.
And look, this is a really tough detail, but you have to hear it to understand the impact. An Arlington police detective on the scene said that a knife or screwdriver had been used to rip her throat out. It's just horrific, and it explains why this case seared itself into the memory of the entire community, and law enforcement too.
But out of that absolute darkness, something truly incredible happened. A local mom, just horrified by what she'd heard, called a radio station. And she had an idea, a simple idea really, that she hoped could stop this from ever happening to another child.
And that idea, well, it became the Amber Alert. It stands for America's Missing Broadcast Emergency Response, and it was named in honor of Amber Hagerman. It launched that same year in 1996. And you know what it does, right? It blasts info across billboards, phones, social media. It basically turns all of us into a massive instant search party.
So what's the impact of that one idea? It's just staggering. That number you see, 1,221. That's how many children have been found and brought home safe because of the Amber Alert system. From one little girl's unimaginable tragedy, over 1,000 lives have been saved.
And here's the part that is just crushing. The system created in her name brings so many families answers, but Amber's own case is still unsolved. As recently as 2021, police said they have DNA, a real link to her killer. But after all this time, almost 3 decades, that killer is still just a shadow.
Okay, our next case is built around this one really unsettling question. Did Vicki Lamberton just choose to disappear, or was she a victim of foul play? Because honestly, the evidence could convince you of either one. Just look at that number, 36. That's 36 years. That's how long it took before Vicki Lamberton was even officially reported missing. For all that time, her family, her friends, they all just kind of thought she'd done what she always talked about doing, starting a new life somewhere else.
And this is where it gets so confusing, because the clues are all over the place. On one side, you've got the idea she just left. She told her husband she wanted to go somewhere nobody knew her. She was always changing her look, and a friend said she might be running off with her professor. Makes sense, right? But then you look at the other side. Her social security number was never touched again. Her driver's license expired and was never renewed. And that story she told about her final trip, a total lie. It's like she just fell off the face of the earth, officially.
And the weird details just keep piling up. All her stuff was found in her professor's garage, but he swore he barely even knew her. Her last phone call wasn't to him, but to her estranged husband, and it sounded like they might get back together. And then years later, some random person calls her family's old farm and claims she's in Europe, which, by the way, Interpol checked out and said, nope, no record of that whatsoever. Every clue just makes it more of a puzzle.
All right, for our last case, we're going all the way back to 1950 at the famous West Point Military Academy. This is where a really bright cadet just walked off campus with a mysterious stranger and straight into a story that honestly feels like it's from some old Cold War spy movie.
So the whole mystery really starts with a visitor, or maybe 2 visitors. A week before he vanished, Cox gets a visit from this fair-haired guy who he says is this violent, boastful ex-ranger. Then, the night he actually disappears, he leaves with a totally different-looking guy. Dark-haired, rough. So what's the deal? Are these 2 different people? Or is it one person who's really good at changing their look? It's just the first of many, many questions. And the way he was acting in his final days, it made no sense. This guy was a gifted student, but he faked an official logbook, a huge deal at West Point. His roommates heard him yelling the name Alice in his sleep. But maybe the biggest clue of all, he left everything behind. His wallet, his clothes, and a ton of cash for that time. This was not a guy just planning to skip town for a weekend.
The official search for Richard Cox just hit a wall. Immediately. The trail went cold from the minute he walked out that gate. But then, as the years went by, a totally different story started to take shape. Maybe Richard Cox wasn't dead. Maybe he was just somewhere else.
These sightings just kept popping up over the next decade. First, literally days after he disappeared, a classmate swears he saw him back in his hometown. 4 years later, another old classmate runs into him at a bus station in D.C., and Cox says he's moving to Germany. Then, in 1960, an FBI informant is in a bar and meets a guy who not only matches his description, but also hints that he works for some kind of intelligence agency.
And this is where the story goes from just a missing persons case to a possible government cover-up. A classmate who had connections to the FBI was told that agents were actually ordered not to pick up Richard Cox if they found him. And when researchers finally got their hands on the case files, a total mess. Blacked out pages everywhere, and over 160 pages just gone. This isn't just about missing a person anymore, it's about missing information.
So what are we left with? 3 cases, all separated by time and circumstance, but they're all tied together by this profound lack of answers. They really force you to wonder about the limits of what we can ever truly know.
When you boil it all down, each story really leaves us with one big question. For Amber Hagerman, it's about science. Can our technology finally close a wound that's been open for decades? For Vicki Lamberton, it's more philosophical. Is it really possible to just walk away and leave zero trace? And for Richard Cox, it's about secrets. Are the real answers being hidden from us on purpose?
You know, these cases kind of suggest that maybe they don't. They're a stark reminder that even in our super-connected world, some stories might just be destined to stay unsolved, with their endings lost somewhere in the shadows. And it really makes you wonder, what other truths are out there waiting just beyond our reach?